Hey, welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz here today on Wednesday, August 6th. Bruntz, we are, 3 weeks away from the eve of Nebraska's season starting. Has that, kicked into you? We're less than a month?
Yeah, 22 days, right? That's what we're at.
Yeah, 22 days. A Rex Burkhead away from Nebraska's first football game of 2025. I feel like, and I have a lot going on that would also cause this. I feel like time has absolutely flown in the last month. Like media days was just a couple of weeks ago, but it feels like that was more recent than it was. Uh, the busy June with the Friday Night Lights and all of the recruiting doesn't seem like that's as long ago as it was. This whole thing, is it snuck up on you or is it just me?
Yeah, it's funny. Like you spend the whole off season just like time just drags. Like it's a long spring ball. May's a little rough. June gets busier. That kind of lag time between the third week of June and like media days feels like it just drags and drags. Although I guess you get the commitments now off of visits, so there's a little something to break that up. But once you get rolling, it's just you're off. Like we got credentials applied for. We're pretty much ready to go. It's funny. I mean, you kind of have that conversation about like the dog days of camp, and that certainly exists. But it feels like with Nebraska starting on a Thursday, it's only a couple days, but it just feels like things are completely sped up because we're really close to getting into game week stuff already because they're going to have to start that a little bit earlier with the Thursday night kickoff.
Yeah, I like the Thursday night kickoff. I'm good with it. Especially they're gonna have a couple random. You got a Thursday night and two Friday night games, so they have less Saturday games than usual. But I feel like if you're playing on a Thursday night, having it start the season is significantly easier than if it's just in the run of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
no,
I
that's true.
I'm definitely looking forward to this. I am going to just kind of start things with Saturday night's Big Red preview. What do you think of the event when you were there, Bruntz? What give me two players that stood out for you. They can be obvious ones, they can be deep cuts. You can go anywhere you want to go with it. Give me two guys. You could even go give me one offense, give me one defense, even that stood out for you on Saturday at the Big Red preview.
I'm gonna cheat. I'll give you one offensive player, and I'll give you a group that stood out, but that I can't single just one guy out. Makai Nelson again. He's almost becoming like the Big Red preview like MVP. Like he popped last year. I think he popped again this year. Just as you're kind of looking at potential, second team backs. Again, looks like he's running with burst. Was kind of a problem for out of the backfield as a receiver. Um, and then the kickers, like it as stupid as it sounds, Nebraska's kickers collectively going 7 for 7 on field goal attempts with no snap issues. That felt like a big deal. Like they probably could have lit off a couple fireworks from the scoreboard, and I would have been okay with it. Like that felt like when it kept building, like they knocked through like a 35 yarder, and then they backed it up, and somebody else hit like a 42 yarder. It was like this building to a big crescendo, and then it was just the lines getting in a fight, and then the defense having to run gassers to atone for it. But that stood out to me as well as like, oh, what do we got here? We got 8 field goals. Look at us.
Yeah, I think this says more about me than the kickers, certainly. But I sat there, just kept waiting for like the shank or, just like an obvious bad kick.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it would go through, and I was pretty sure from the angle of which I was sitting that it went through, but I would still like zero in on the officials every time to make sure that the hands were going up in
Yeah.
the known notion. And yeah, I thought the kicker stood out as well. Before I throw a couple other players that I thought stood out, I want to mention this group because it was one that I was pretty focused on coming into the Big Red preview. and wanted to sort of see what they had. And I actually thought pretty much everyone sort of had a moment throughout. Nebraska's wide receivers, and I fell in this trap last year, and I'm just going to go ahead and fall in the potential trap this year or into the riches. Who knows?
Yeah.
It could be like one of those Scrooge McDuck things. I could be rolling around in just coins of riches with my thoughts on the wide receivers, or I could just be tunneling to wherever, it goes for the robbers who try to steal Scrooge McDuck's money. But
it's deep cut.
Yeah, it is a deep cut, but I think people will appreciate it.
Yep.
I think if you're a certain age, you know Scrooge McDuck pretty well, or DuckTales just in general. But I digress. The wide receivers look very good, and the important thing there is Dane Key wasn't even really part of it. And I got thrown off, and you can make fun of me for this. Nebraska's having all of these receivers with the numbers, in the teens, and then you're trying to remember who's what. You also know that single digits are going to be showing up. So I'm not overly trying to commit things to memory. I completely forgot that Dane Key was not in, and I had him confused with Cortez Mills at one point. Cortez Mills had a great practice. He had a couple really nice catches. I think you were there for the 7-on-7 portion where he had a route where I don't remember who was in defense, but he just shook him completely on his route. And Cortez Mills, I think, is going to be really kind of fun player to follow. And just in that grouping alone, Ja'Cory Barney, I think he's going to be an exciting guy. And Isaiah Hunter got shook up a little bit when he crashed into the back of the end zone and then shook it off, came back. He had a touchdown in the live period. Keelan Smith, he's a guy I'll just use as the offensive player that stood out for me. Keelan Smith, I thought, was great throughout practice. Yeah. He had a couple really nice one-on-one wins. He had several live period wins. He had like the equivalent to the Mo Purify slant route touchdown against Texas, where he sort of caught a pass over the middle and two defenders kind of converged on it, and neither one knew which one was going to try to hit Keelan Smith, who just sneaked right through him and ran it into the end zone. He was greeted by the other wide receivers who were going nuts on the sidelines. And so he had a really nice practice. That's a guy, Bruntz, we probably don't talk enough out of that 2024 class. He had a monster, and I mean monster, senior year in Kansas City, and really sort of announced himself as one of the best players in the city. And he had a fine junior year. And I remember when Nebraska took him, I was like, okay, well, got the NFL bloodlines. Neil Smith's his dad. Like, seems like a solid player. Then he has that big year, and then he doesn't do as much as a redshirt freshman. And of course, you have Ja'Cory Barney and Carter Nelson and all these other shiny toys. That's a guy that, pushing from behind at some of those outside wide receiver positions, I would have to think that Gil Shorts feels pretty good about some of the depth that he has there, right now at this point in camp.
Yeah, no, Keelan Smith definitely popped. That wide receiver group is really interesting, and I'm glad you brought him up because it's a kind of you've got a variety of kind of looks in that group. Like you said, Dane Key wasn't in there, but you had an Isaiah Hunter. The top group was an Isaiah Hunter, Ja'Cory Barney, Cortez Mills, I think, was kind of slotting in where Key would have been. Barney and Mills are a little bit on the smaller side compared to the rest of the group. And then you roll out a second group of Keelan Smith, who's listed, I believe, at 6'3", Quinn Clark, who's 6'5", 6'6", probably. And then Jeremiah Jones, who is 6'4", every bit of 6'4". You've got a lot of different looks and skill sets there that I think you can really be successful with. And, of the freshmen and newcomers that are there, it almost feels like we're not talking enough about Cortez Mills. Like he's kind of flown under the radar a little bit, in part because of the new additions and the transfers that came in the offseason. But again, that was a huge recruiting win for Nebraska. A guy that really had a pretty earned reputation on the 7-on-7 circuit for making tough contested catches and big plays. And I mean, it's not a stretch to say that he's going to be firmly in that rotation, I think, once the season rolls along. So I'm glad that he kind of is getting a little bit of recognition because he had a couple of really tough catches. And I think he's going to be able to come in and make an impact right away. And I think they're going to rely on him to do that. So, yeah, I mean, when your initial question was who stood out, I mean, I thought, you kind of just go down the line on the wide receiver performance, and they did it against what I think is a pretty good secondary. Like I don't think it's like you rolled in thinking that the wide receivers were just going to completely steamroll the defensive backs. I mean, it was competitive back and forth, I thought. And I thought that also with the defensive line and the offensive line for the most part. But no, the wide receivers, I think overall, I think they have a stronger group than what they had a year ago. So maybe that bodes well for a big step and a few more bigger plays.
Yeah, I just want to, as a point of order, because we're coming out of an era with Scott Frost where the wide receivers, when you say that they were like Cortez Mills, you said a little smaller. Cortez Mills listed at Nebraska as 6 foot, 185 pounds.
Right.
But you're also thinking of the era in which guys were like weighing 165, 170 pounds, 5'9", the Mike Williams, if you will.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So I do want to clarify at least a little bit.
Right.
When Bruntz says a little smaller, it's relative to Dane Key, Keelan Smith, Janiron Bonner, Quinn Clark, all being 6'2" or bigger.
Yeah.
So even Ja'Cory Barney, which I don't know if I think this is an accurate measurement. Do you know what his height is listed at on Huskers.com?
They say 6'1", right? Isn't it like 6'1"?
They list him at 6 foot. Okay. I don't think he's 6 foot.
No.
Just not buying the company line on that one.
Yeah, they probably gave him an inch or two there.
But that's perfectly fine. Ja'Cory Barney looked good. I enjoyed. You were still there when he was hyping things up to a high degree with the greatest special teams in the.
Yeah, he was doing it. He was doing it on the front of the stage while his kickers were banging him through on the backside of things.
I'm
no
a little
pressure.
worried about his vocal cords. I mean, he's really screaming.
That would be a bad fall camp injury. The vocal cord injury.
Do you think Dwayne needs to be worried that Ja'Cory Barney's coming for his hype man job?
Well, I don't know. Dwayne's kind of everywhere though. I don't know if Ja'Cory Barney has that much time.
Not presently, but in the off season. Nebraska finishes out with their college football playoff appearance, and whatever happens after that, sometime in like January, you'd think Ja'Cory Barney could show up at basketball games and hype people up and talk about the full court putt and if that's going to happen tonight and that sort of thing.
He was at the Big Ten baseball tournament too. The whole tournament. I don't know.
Ja'Cory Barney was?
No, Dwayne.
Oh well, you never know.
He's got a lot on his plate.
I'm just saying, Dylan Raiola and Emmett Johnson were showing up to random things. So
that's true.
Nebraska has an off-season point system where they encourage players to go to other sports and they can earn points to their culture aspect that Matt Rule is trying to build. Because I'm aware of multiple different Nebraska athletes that were attending men's and women's tennis often this spring. So I don't know. Maybe Ja'Cory Barney was just trying to set the record for baseball.
It could be. No, Dwayne, not Ja'Cory Barney.
Apologies to Dwayne. Let's take this back to Big Red Preview. Defensively, kind of working through things. I might as well just get it out of the way because I've been talking about him since Saturday night. But Jordan Ochoa, I thought looked great. I asked John Butler about him yesterday, even though John Butler doesn't like talking about individual players. John Butler gave a pretty good response, even though he doesn't like talking about individual players. He kind of cut himself off because I think he was going to go a little bit deeper into it. But the gist of it is he didn't know who Jordan Ochoa was until bowl prep. He liked watching him run around, decided to put him in the game. Ochoa got a sack. I believe it was like an 11-yard sack. He's continued to sort of just impress John Butler, and he is very much in the mix at that jack spot that I think Willis McGahee, I think Jordan Ochoa, Deshaun McCullough. I mean, those are kind of your three guys there. And McCullough, I think they can sort of move around. I don't know that he is going to have a traditional positional home, but Ochoa is someone I think the fan base needs to be aware of if they haven't already, caught on to that at this point. But he's going to play, and I think he's going to play a fair amount early, and then if it goes well, a lot throughout the season.
I think what you'll see is I think you're going to see more mixing and matching on obvious pass situations. Like I would not be surprised to see multiple jacks out there on 3rd and long. Like I think you'll see McGahee out there with McCullough and Ochoa or whoever. I think there's a pretty strong chance you're going to see that. I think that's where the aggressiveness is going to come from. That's going to look a little bit different in this defense. By the way, do you know how many snaps Jordan Ochoa played last year?
24.
He played 6.
Yeah. Well, he got a sack and 6 snaps. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
if you just get a sack every 6 snaps,
it's not a bad batting average.
That would be, like you used to do the home run per at bats, and anytime you're like under 10, it's pretty phenomenal. If you're getting a sack every 6 snaps defensively, you're probably going to have a hell of a season.
Yeah.
That or you didn't get to play as much.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. The jack spots, because like McGahee, he's going to play a lot. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how you keep him off the field. So I think it's going to be.
I don't know why you would keep him off the field either.
I think they're going to find a way to kind of maximize that position group a little bit. So I was going to ask you, what we got to see the offensive line going against the defensive line. This kind of plays on your defensive question. Did you learn anything about the defensive line the other night that I guess kind of changed your thinking about things, or maybe departed from what you thought going into Saturday?
My general feeling with the defensive line is that I just sort of have a blind trust that Matt Rule will have a pretty stout group, even if it's not a well-known group at this point in time. I think Elijah Judy is going to be a really big key to this whole thing. I mean, I know that's not like a out there take or any sort of salient point, but I thought it was interesting. You kind of pointed out he was doing really well on one-on-ones against Nebraska's interior. He was really active in terms of, it looked like, communication and motioning and moving pre-snap during some of the live period stuff. I thought that was sort of interesting. He's a guy that I think the talent's sort of always been there, but they haven't quite been able to harness how they wanted to use him. And he's been behind some other talented guys, so he hasn't necessarily had that opportunity. Now he does. He's a dad. He's got that dad strength that he can use at any time that he needs to deploy. And he's sort of I don't want to say X factor, but he's a pretty intriguing guy when you talk about sort of a core 4 of Cam Lenhart, Keona Davis, Riley Van Poppel, and Elijah Judy. I mean, I feel like you got to get a fair amount of snaps out of those 4 guys, and then you kind of see what fills in behind them. But I think so far with what we've watched, Judy looks like he's kind of belongs in that group. Now we'll see what it looks like when they play Cincinnati, and more critically when Michigan comes to town at the beginning of Big Ten play. But I thought he held his own, and I think I continue to feel cautiously optimistic about that defensive line.
Yeah, Judy's interesting because I don't know, like when he came from A&M, they got him down to 270 pounds or something like that. Like he was basically an end, and he's kind of like yo-yoed with
They
his
built
weight.
him back up. Yeah,
built him back up. He came in at 310 this past week. He's down to right around 300. He's trying to get to 295, but I think having just like a clear kind of picture of what they need from him would help a ton there. Like it's just felt like throughout his college career, not only in Nebraska, but even at A&M, it's like, is this guy, is he an interior player? Is he more of an end in a 3-4? Are we going to try to make him into more of a pass rusher? Like what does he do? And I guess that was in the back of my mind as he was going through one-on-ones, because he's got a quickness in small spaces that I think could really benefit Nebraska, especially if you're talking about getting pressure, sacks, that kind of thing. Like, I think that's where I'm intrigued with it. You put him out there in the middle of the line on 3rd down. You've got McGahee out there. You've got a couple other pass rushers around him. I mean, that's an okay look, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think when you kind of start talking about that whole operation, it feels like whatever he's going to be this year is going to be very, very telling about what that line can be as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I am sort of fascinated what the rotational pieces behind them look like. I'm kind of curious to hear from Coach Braden at some point here this fall camp to sort of pick his brain and see what he's seeing. But they're just going to be you're going to have to take kind of a wait and see approach with Nebraska's defensive line, and they could exceed expectations, they could meet expectations, they could come in below expectations. They sort of, Bruntz, is it fair to say, have maybe the widest range of most of Nebraska's position groups, which I know is a mouthful given that special teams exists. But if you're just going with straight positional groups between offense or defense,
Yeah.
I feel like they have the widest sort of range of outcome to me. Or
Yeah.
maybe that's just a better way to say it, is I have the least grasp on what they're going to look like.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, running back probably enters that conversation a little bit, but I mean, at least you feel like you've got kind of a core group of players that you can build around on that side of the ball. But yeah, I mean, and especially beyond the top group and even the top group. I mean, it's not like Keona Davis played a ton last year. There's a lot of guys in that group that are being asked to do a lot more, and be counted on a lot more than what they have been in the past. The second group that they ran out there was Murphy, it was Van Poppel, and it was Williams Nwaneri. And I think combined, those guys had fewer than 100 snaps last year, or right around it, with Van Poppel having the most of it. So, for whatever that second group, that rotational group looks like, they're going to need a lot more from those guys. Cause I think that's been kind of the problem in the past a little bit. And you also, had Ty and Nash to kind of wallpaper over some of those depth concerns of like, they just played a ton last year, Ty Robinson especially. So, getting that kind of next group up to speed, and whoever that ends up being, is going to be really important. And I mean, maybe, Jalen George was still in the green jersey. Maybe they get him back in some form or fashion. That would be really big, I think, to just add a little bit more experience. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation because it's also a group that historically Matt Rule's teams have been very good at, regardless of personnel or location. So, it's just going to be a really important 3 weeks here coming up to get to continue to develop those guys.
No question. Let's jump over to defensive back real quick. We heard from Addison Williams on Tuesday. What are your thoughts just from what he said? I mean, he didn't really tip his hand a whole lot. They've got veterans there. They've got some interesting young guys. He's looking for playmakers. He's looking for communicators. He's looking for consistency. I don't know that any of that is a surprise to
So
anyone sitting
we're
in
all
there.
looking for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just daily. You're looking for that. But as you sort of size that group up, is there anybody that kind of stands out to you at this point in time out of the defensive backfield?
Well, I mean, Andrew Marshall, I think, is going to be a huge piece there. We heard from him yesterday. He was
Do you
with the
feel like
one.
that? Let me ask it this way: is the starting five? What level of confidence are you that the top five guys, barring any sort of injury status, are going to be Marshall on one side, Wright on another, Malcolm Hartzog at nickelback, Buford and Singleton at safety?
I think that's your group.
Yeah.
Here's a question though.
So 75% confident in that? 80?
I'd say 80. But is that the group in, say, week 6? That I don't know.
They don't have to be beholden to it because they have so many bodies. They have a lot of guys they like, whether it's Donovan Jones, whether it's Caleb Benning, whether it's Jameer Khan, whether it is I'm blanking on other people, but they have a lot of defensive backs back there. And these things tend to kind of shake themselves out, but Justin Rhett was the name that I was trying to get to. They just have some different people. And then a guy like Donovan Jones has the ability to play corner or safety. I think they'd like to keep him at safety, but if they need him at corner, it doesn't seem like they would hesitate to throw him in out there either. You have Jeremiah Charles as someone that started. You were just busy rewatching the UCLA game because you hate your life. He started in that game. Wasn't a great start for him, but you can tell they trust him enough that they even put him in that position.
Yeah, when I ask that question, the name I kind of go to is Donovan Jones. Like, what is his role in this defense? Because I think, given the versatility, given what we've seen in small sample sizes, it feels like he is ready for something. That's what I kind of wonder. Like, okay, is this experienced group going to be the one that sticks, and how much does that experience carry them through versus a younger player that is probably ready for the for the lights to be on, but maybe initially doesn't have a perfect spot. um they got a ton of guys back there, like just a ton. And it's interesting, it's an interesting group just based on how it's being coached, because you've got Addison Williams, John Butler is, he's walking around, he's coordinating with different position groups, but if you always watch where he's watching practice from, he's always right behind the safeties. Like he's right there. Then you've got Phil Snow over there working with the defensive backs too, who's got, as much experience as a college coach as anybody on that staff. Um, so there's a lot of resources being dedicated to that, and I think a lot of talent too. So I don't know that that just going to be the guys that are in there week one are going to necessarily be the guys that you count on later in the year, and I think that's okay. Like that signifies that you have depth, you have experience, and you're doing a good job of developing guys, which is kind of the idea.
I want to get in one more position group. I want to jump over to the offensive side of the ball because they didn't get talked about that much from our little area of influence, I guess, in the Nebraska media. But I know that we all were sort of impressed by different people in there, or just a group as a whole, and just kind of the emergence of, hey, that guy looks pretty healthy. Think he's going to play. And it's your favorite position group on the whole roster. Let's get a little tight end talk in here as we close things out on today's podcast. What did you sort of see at the open practice? Because I think that's kind of a fun group where they lost Mac Markway, but you have Luke Lindenmeyer, who had a couple of nice catches. You have Carter Nelson, who has a ton of athleticism, and I'm fascinated how he's going to be used, and he looked healthy. And then Heinrich Harburg had a nice catch along the sidelines, and he's still sort of learning in that role, and we know about his athleticism. Let's finish things up here with Bruntz's thoughts on Nebraska's tight ends as we get closer to the season.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to the wide receiver group in some ways, where you have just kind of a mix of body types and strengths and things like that. Are Carter Nelson and Heinrich Harburg going to be in there, blocking for you 35 plays a game? Probably not. Like that's definitely more Luke Lindenmeyer territory. That's where not having Markway hurts you a little bit, because he was going to be that second blocking tight end who could also go out and catch passes. But no, I'm curious to see what they draw up for those guys. It is going to be an interesting group that opposing teams are going to have to game plan for, because Heinrich Harburg is extremally athletic, but is still very clearly learning the tight end position and getting more comfortable with running routes and going in there and blocking when he has to. Carter Nelson kind of the same way. I thought he looked like after the catch too, he wasn't just like he was running a little angry when he could, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to see who that second blocking tight end was. We saw, was it Caden Echternock?
Caden Echternock
Was in there with Lindenmeyer and some short yardage stuff. So I don't know. I think Lindenmeyer is a fascinating player, because I think Dana Holgerson really likes him and trusts him, and I think he can do enough in that offense to be effective, both as a blocker and as a receiver when he has to too.
Kind of a weird problem for Nebraska to have, that they have all these different wide receivers and several tight ends that are interesting, and how do you get them on the field all at the same time? A good thing, because you have a different way of attacking and you can do different things based on the opponent, but it is going to be sort of interesting how that will all come together.
Here's one last one for you. Of the non-Dillon quarterback, who impressed you?
I remain just sort of very intrigued by TJ Lateef. I think they like him a lot over there. It seems, I don't know that they would trust him if something happened right away, but I think he's a guy that will continue to earn more discussion and could even end up being your backup quarterback somewhere into the season. And then they really obviously like Jalen Gramstad. I remain very skeptical that if you have to, I think of him in sort of the Andrew Bunch-esque territory, that if you need him to come into the middle of a game, but do you want him to start a whole game? Do you want him to start multiple games? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical as to what that happens to your passing offense if you have to go that route. But I think TJ Lateef still has a lot that he has to get better at. And then, we have Marcos Davila lurking a little bit. I think he's been a little further back than maybe where they might have expected when they brought him in the transfer portal. But the arm talent is there. I mean, he's got a good enough arm. It strikes me as there's maybe some other stuff that isn't quite where it needs to be in terms of him. But they have a kind of a fast. Everything about this team is more interesting than previous seasons. And I don't know if it's because we're that close to the start of the year, or if it's because we've had less access, or if they've had enough roster turnover with the different transfer portal guys. But I just feel like you can take most of these positions and they're not boring. Like there's conversations to be had about everything on the offense, even if it's just running back where it's, hey, can Emmett Johnson handle this workload and who the hell is behind him? Or if it's the offensive line, like they've got a lot of depth this year. I wonder how that's going to shake out. I wonder what their best 5 version is. Could they have 2 guys that are competing right now at left tackle and one of them moves to right tackle by the end of camp? That sort of thing. Like it's everywhere on offense and pretty much everywhere on defense, except maybe the linebacking group. I think there's a ton of the linebackers feel like they're pretty set. Like they've got their young guys that are going to develop, and then it's going to be a lot of Vincent Shavers, a lot of Javen Wright, a lot of Watson Trent, and then we'll see kind of what fills in behind it. That might be the quietest group on the entire roster.
Is it fair to say that there's just more pieces? Like if you're trying to put the whole picture together, at least it feels like there's more possible pieces than what they've had the last year. It
feels like there's more guys that can, in theory, go off or do something or be interesting, or, instead of just like, well, if Adrian Martinez doesn't scramble for X amount of yards and then find, these 6 open passes or whatever it is, it just feels like there's a bigger dynamic to this roster than maybe what we've been used to. But I also feel like some of that is we are inching closer to the season, and I've talked myself into things at this point in time. So, there's always that too. Yeah. Is that fair?
No, that's fair. It's officially that time of year. It's the reason for the season.
Yeah. It's not talking season. It's talking yourself into season. So, all right. Well, talk yourself into visiting Husker247.com. Actually, you don't have to talk yourself into that. It's very easy to do. Just type into your URL box, Husker247.com. Get lost in all the coverage that we have for Nebraska athletics. BC was over there for media with Fred Hoiberg the other day. He let it slip while we were sitting in a quiet moment of the press conference yesterday. BC's very fired up for Nebraska basketball.
Whoa.
I retain this. I have that enthusiasm as well. I think I was already sort of there a little bit before him, but it's the rink mast effect. Mast at full go. Full mast means full excitement for Nebraska basketball. So we have coverage on that as well. Recruiting is starting to pick up. Nebraska high school football starts August 11th. They get practices going underway. So we'll have some coverage of what's going on here locally as well, with some of the recruits Nebraska will be chasing, as well as the guys that they're chasing nationally, as well as everything else. I noticed, Bruntz, the other day, we had a women's basketball recruiting story. So we were covering things from all angles. Of course, there's volleyball will be starting up, and we'll be passing along some info on things there. This is a great time to get over to Husker247.com. Do yourself a favor. Check it out. Never leave. We'll keep you forever. So for Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker247. We'll catch you next time.